Giddy up. Giddy up for Tesla, giddy up for the markets, giddy up for the whole damn thing, John. It's great because now all the windsocks that are out there, and I think we all know who the primary windsock leader is, suddenly they all love Tesla. And you loved it before they loved it.
Yeah. Hey, by the way, I've been in this name for a long time. I've been telling you guys about it. No, you haven't. No, you haven't.
And John, if they've been in it for a long time, they're actually, crap out of luck, right? Because that long time ago means they were up here, it came down to here. It's still not back up to there. I mean, let's be honest. But
it's up today, Pete. So there's people out there that are going to say, "Oh yeah, I was long it." You and I said it on the show yesterday. I said it live on TV with Charles Payne yesterday. By the way, Pete, that trade we did on TV with Charles yesterday was 145, 160. So with the stock basically, and we're talking Tesla, folks, back up at 158, I think that trade worked out pretty well.
That seems like it's pretty good. That's pretty good. We should start with the macro minute, though. We're already jumping ahead, so let's hit that, and then we'll roll.
Yep. Macro babble today is that the markets are still hanging in there, and crude oil is still pushing higher. That's what I'm going to leave it with, Pete.
Well, we're really close to what we're thinking about as far as macro, and you and I don't really talk about this one much, and then we just see what the other guy's thinking. My first two thoughts were energy and technology, and that's really what's going on. And obviously, when I say technology, that encompasses Tesla and all those big cap tech names, semiconductors and all of that as well. I'll throw those in there. And you look at the price of crude at 81. You put all that together, energy is leading, technology is right there with them, and that's really what's pulling the markets higher early on. Next.
Yep. 12 seconds to spare, Pete. All right. So Tesla. Just as we said, Tesla really making a nice rip to the upside. It was basically unched when they came out with the earnings, Pete, and then people started to sort of dive in a little more and seeing that the earnings are up 40%, folks. That is why Pete and I have big smiles on our faces, because we're Tesla shareholders, and we said it before the windsock blew in a certain direction.
Well, and that windsock will keep on blowing, John, and they're going to be following this thing around. Let's get out of it at 101 because it's going to go down to 80, and let's buy it at 160 because it's going to 200. I mean, that whole thing's crazy. Here's what you need to know. They delivered absolutely unbelievable numbers. Their production, and they talked about the different things about the Cybertruck and everything else, John. I think the combination of how they delivered that, Elon Musk once again being the brilliant guy that he is, but the production being up 44%. And then you look over at the supercharge stations as well, up 35%. They are doing so many things right in a market that's been very, very difficult to be able to do that. They're getting it done. And it's really, really impressive. And that's why you're seeing Tesla make a screaming move to the upside. I think, what did he hit today, John? Like 163, maybe something like that?
On the highs, I think it was, Pete. Revenue up 37%. I'm reading it from here. Vehicle production deliveries up 44%.
It's not too bad.
Auto gross margin slipped. That was really the only negative I saw in the report at all, Pete. And we know why it slipped. He cut the prices during the quarter. So,
which we knew. We knew.
Yeah. That was a known, not a known unknown. Anyway, supercharger stations. How about this? He's got 40 some odd thousand of them now, Pete. This is just a fabulous report. And I just was delighted. I had no hedge on my biggest position in Tesla. I have a long-term position too, Pete, that I really like, which was owning the leaps and selling an upside 160 call. And that one looks like it'll be about a 600% winner as well. But I'm just letting that one sit. That's like money in the bank.
Well, and the beautiful part, and then we'll jump to XM, but the beautiful part about that, John, is you're taking advantage of the situation where you've got high implied volatilities in the near term. You are going out further out into the future for the long side of things. and you can take advantage of that implied volatility, screaming to the upside and now getting sucked back down.
Yep. Well, Pete mentioned XM, and it's not Sirius XM, folks. This is called Qualtrics. But basically, a Utah-based application software company, and they are putting up nice numbers, and one of their major shareholders is going to divest its stake in the company. Now, to some people, that would be, oh, a big shareholder's getting out. But in this case, they're reading it as a positive.
Mm-hmm. They are, John. Here's the other thing. They've got a great pipeline. They've got loyalty. They've got a customer base that continues to want to be with them. Their future business, they were talking about that. That's the outlook, in other words, that you're getting. And the outlook is great. And so for a number of these reasons, that's why we're seeing the stock move the way it is today. And on top of that, John, how about the 12 million shares? Normally trades 1.5 million shares a day. 12 million shares last I looked. I'm sure it's even higher by now. The only issue I have, and you know where I'm going, it still needs to make money. These guys got to show us that they can make money. They're starting to, but that's got to be consistent as well. And they are in the right direction. So I really like what we're seeing out of the company right now.
Yep, I like it. XM up 31%, folks, right now at mid-session. All right. How about Mobileye, Pete? Also killing it. Everybody thought we'd be in flying cars and cars would be driving themselves years ago. And yet we all knew that wasn't really technology that was ready for prime time yet. However, Mobileye now up double digits. And the reason it's up double digits is, guess what? More and more companies need what they do to make autonomous self-driving vehicles, Pete.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty impressive, John. And you look at the revenue growth, it's only 59%. I mean, it's not that, holy crap, that's a huge number. Then you look at gross margins. That's a nice one. That's expanding as well. Then you look across at the earnings. Their earnings just keep on crushing, John. They've got 27 cents. They were looking for 17 cents. They beat on revenue by a substantial amount. Everything seems to be going in the right direction for these guys. I'll tell you what, I've always been impressed with what they do. And they emphasize, by the way, this is assisted driving. This is not, hey, look, we are absolutely taking over the car and that's the way it's going to be. And I think that people are finally starting to get that, understand that a little bit better. But this is a company that just continues to impress. And this was amazing numbers that they put up.
Yep. 6% of, let's see, well, vehicle owners, I misspoke when I said 6%. Vehicle owners really do want some sort of assist. They're not, most of us probably aren't comfortable just giving the whole thing over to the car and to the technology, but an awful lot of people like the idea that they can just sit there and stay in the lane and not worry about, basically driving, but just kind of letting the car take over with all of these Mobileye functions. And yeah, it's coming, folks, and it's getting closer and closer every day. It's not just Tesla. All right. What about Sherwin-Williams, Pete? This one down almost double digits. Manufacturer of coatings, which people hear coatings, Pete, and they don't really know what it is, but they do a lot of coating for various big industrial applications, not just paint. But anyway, they had disappointing earnings, and I think we know why. People just weren't buying homes as fast. That hits to the paint side of the business, and the coating side is probably what saved them this quarter, Pete.
Yeah, it did. But also, John, when they look at the outlook, that really is why people started hammering back down on the stock again. Because when you look at what's going on here and they're talking about, well, from the challenges they face right now come from housing and the industrial side. That's kind of a double whammy. They were expected to be earning something closer to $10 a share. They're now saying closer to maybe 8 to 8.60. So that's pretty long way away from where they were supposed to be. That's why people are kind of hammering the stock. When you look at it, it's off of the lows of 195 for sure, but it's well off of the highs at 295 as well. So they're going to have to prove something in the next couple of quarters that they are somehow being able to, having the ability to navigate better than they expected. If they can do that, this is a stock that has a little bit of upside, but it's getting hammered today. There's no doubt.
Yeah, it's a $59 billion stock too. So, like Pete said, when it was 295, it was significantly bigger than now with it at 226. All right, Pete, let me give you an unusual activity. CRM. I know that you know the founder and the CEO, and they got rid of that co-CEO in this past quarter. But the real CEO is Benioff is still at the company, and we see the February 170 calls being bought aggressively with the stock just under 160. So I was willing to, since almost 10,000, which would be a million share equivalent, I was willing to jump into this one again. So a million shares of $160 stock, you guys can do the math, $160 million bet potentially that shares go higher over the next 4 weeks. I like that bet, and I was willing to ride it. So I'm in the trade, Pete.
Well, John, and I agree with you. And this has been a stock that actually we see almost every day. Seems like it's moving a little bit higher, a little bit higher. Yeah, it pulls back, but then it goes a little bit higher. So they've had a nice run of it for sure. Here's the other thing I'm looking at, John. On Tuesday, for unusual, I was talking about Apple, and we had those calls that were out to April. The April 155 calls were being bought, 17,000 of those. The stock was right around 140. Today, stock's trading about 143, a little bit higher than that when this trade started to hit. 18,000 of next Friday, that's the third, the 150 calls getting bought. Those were 114 all the way up to about 145. The interesting thing is, when do they deliver their earnings? Let's see. I believe that's February 2nd, the day before. So they're definitely going after the earnings, expecting something pretty decent out of these earnings. And who knows? I mean, we've seen what Tesla delivered. We've seen a couple other names that have surprised for sure. We'll find out, obviously, more about Apple, but can't help yourself when you see this one. 18,000 of those calls being bought. They got earnings as a catalyst, so you know what it is. And it doesn't have to happen if you don't have to wait till next week. If we get a run early in the week, John, I think it would be a smart thing to start saying, you know what, if this thing starts to move, we get a bit enough of a move towards 150, those things are going to start to move. And maybe the implied volatility starts to move even a little bit more as well. That starts to happen. You maybe are going to be able to trim into it and then hold and see what happens after that. So pretty excited about this one. I like this. I'm already in it, but I've already also was in those Aprils as well.
Yep. And they've got earnings next Thursday, Pete. So these calls that Pete's talking about that they purchased, folks, are calls that cover you for the earnings. By cover you, I mean you'll have exposure to the earnings if you trade these calls. So be aware, as always, because it's a short-term trade, but it's also there's not a lot of time built into those calls. It's all just volatility and premium for how Tim Cook is going to be describing how well they do or what they missed on. And I think it's still a pretty good quarter for them. All right, Pete, let's hit a little bit more on the sports side. What do you want to talk about?
Well, I thought it was fun, John, because, we don't see this very often. We've seen certain schools over the years who've really dominated, but how about Alabama? Now, Alabama, the football program, is what everybody knows, right? Everybody knows it's Nick Saban and this, that, and the other. It's even more impressive than I thought, though, John. Since 2014, they've been ranked in the top 5 in 14, 15, 2016, 17, 18, 2020, 21, and 22. That's not so bad. That's a powerful, group right there. But how about the fact that they're not just doing that with football? How about the basketball program? You know what they're ranked? Number 2 in the country, right behind Purdue in the Big Ten. And they've done that with a new coach. They changed a lot of things just very recently, a couple of years ago. They grabbed the coach from Buffalo who absolutely shocked the world several years ago in the NCAA tournament, took out Arizona in game 1 and continued on and had a pretty nice run of it. And then they come up the next year with an even better record, and they got even further along. So this is a coach that a lot of people were starting to say, hey, look, what about this guy, Nate Oates? Well, Alabama said, we're not just interested in staring at him. We're going to grab him. And they did. Here now, Alabama sits at number 2 in the country. They're absolutely dominating people weekend, every weekday, whenever the opportunity is, they get on the court. it's fun to watch, and it's probably the most dominating thing I've seen in a long time, John, because what are the two biggest sports? What are the two money sports for these universities? Men's basketball and absolutely football. And Alabama is absolutely going after it like I've never seen a school do, and they're having great success. Is there anybody you can put up there that you think right now, John? I couldn't think of anybody else where they've got all the different pieces, where they've got all of this going in, and it's impressive. I think Bama stands out. I mean, Georgia's basketball, I'm not sure when the last time you and I heard about that.
Right. Well, and I think there's a little bit of a read through here as far as pro teams, Pete, because Bama has none.
Right.
I mean, for those of you who are unaware, Atlanta's in Georgia. So there are no pro teams in Alabama. You might push back and say, well, there are minor league teams. Yeah, minor league teams. But there's no competition like there is with the Atlanta Falcons, like there is with the Atlanta Braves, like there is with the Atlanta Hawks, and all that sort of stuff, the ATL. So the fact that these guys just have college sports as their thing between basically Bama and even Auburn, Pete, these are two great programs. They both put up big fans through the doors for both football and basketball, to Pete's point. So I think some of that comes from people love these two sports and they don't have anywhere else to go. Yeah. I mean, this is it. It's like you either watch Bama football or Bama basketball or the Auburn version of that, or you don't watch because there's no Superdome to go to. There's no Texas Stadium to go to. And I think that helps them actually.
Yeah, I think it does too, John. The only thing they might have that somebody might chirp back at us and say, well, what about the USFL? Well, I'd chirp back to them and say, it's the USFL. Anyway, let's be honest. And I like it. It's fun. I played in those kind of leagues myself, but I mean, it's not the same. It isn't the NFL. There's no doubt about that. No. So next, John, we're going to talk about Brock Purdy a little bit. Now, we've been kind of warming up to this whole thing, and obviously we're getting closer to the Super Bowl. They're going to go out, they being the 49ers, are going to go out to Philadelphia, and they've got a huge game in front of them, right? And Jalen Hurts has been absolutely extraordinary. By the way, the four quarterbacks that are now into these last two games that we've got, the championship games, average age, John, is 25.3 years old. And the youngest of them is this guy, Brock Purdy. And what makes him so interesting is he starts out as Mr. Irrelevant. Then he becomes the third string quarterback, and he's got Trey Lance in front of him, Jimmy G. Then Trey Lance gets hurt, then Jimmy G is there. And then Jimmy G gets hurt. He gets his opportunity. And the kid has done everything right since he's had the opportunity. Now, he's thrown 4 interceptions, none of them costly. They've won every single game that he has started. So that part of it, I think, is really impressive. Oh, by the way, they've averaged 32 points per game since he became the starting quarterback as well. So this is the 49ers, known for defense, known not for a lot of offense, but enough to be able to win. And the defense is going to give them the opportunity to outscore them because they're so daggone good on the defensive side. But I think when you look at Brock Purdy, why is he doing so well, John? I took a look at this. How about this? San Francisco, since he became the starter, the Dolphins, they rushed for 120 yards against the Dolphins, 210 against Tampa, 170 against Seattle, another 180 against Seattle in the playoffs, 150 against Washington, 170 against the Raiders, 170 against Arizona. You get the idea. They are running the football, and this kid is able to get back there and have enough time to get the ball to Kittle and to McCaffrey and to Debo and to everybody else that they're trying to throw the ball to. But those running backs are the key. And I think that's what makes Brock Purdy so good. Ego. His ego's not big, at least not yet. And because of that, he's willing to hand the ball off and occasionally throw the ball. I think San Francisco takes Philadelphia down. What do you think about these games this weekend? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, well, Pete, I would love to see Cincinnati and San Francisco. I do think we will see Cincinnati because as great as Mahomes is, if he's not 100%, and the same Cincinnati offense and defense that just played their hearts out up in Buffalo shows up. I think they beat Kansas City, because I think they were both underrated, the offense and defense for Cincy. Now, as far as Purdy, I was reading, Pete, what Lou Saban said when he was not recruited by Bama. He said, your height is average. Your arm strength is whatever. Your accuracy is average. Actually, he said he's below average in height, 6'1". Yeah. This guy's not, he's not Russell Wilson, folks. Right. He is much bigger than Russell Wilson, but you hear all the time that, well, he's kind of small.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want Tom Brady, if you want somebody 6'4" or 5, okay. But not every guy that wins in the NFL is that size.
Right.
And again, Pete always says this, folks, because of the combine and so forth, that there are airport players, players that look great walking through the airport, tiny waist, big chest, they look like they could, lift the world and all that kind of stuff. But it's, what did you do? Were you a winner? And again, I'll throw it back to another thing our dad used to always say, Pete, a monkey, you could teach a monkey to be a surgeon. He said, but it's knowing when to do it that's the issue. In the case of being a quarterback, there's a lot of guys that have big arms, but do they read offenses, or do they try to force the ball in and get a lot of picks? Like you said, this guy's one of the leading statistical players in the NFL for these 8 games or whatever that he's been playing, Pete, because he's not putting up the interceptions. And part of that is Christian McCaffrey. We know that. But, hey, anybody could have gone to Carolina and made a deal. San Francisco did it, and it turned their season around.
Yeah, and that's why, and you and I talked about this during the middle of the season when John Lynch made that move. We said, you know what? That's GM of the year. That was the best move of any team, was at the trade deadline. He went out and got Christian McCaffrey, and I think that changed their season because they've got great running backs. They really do. They've got all 3 of them, including McCaffrey. All of them average 5 yards a carry, but part of that is because McCaffrey, Debo, and Kittle, all of them, they change what the defense can do against them when they're running the ball, throwing the ball, and everything else. So it's going to be fun. I know it's a long shot, but you know what? They're going to travel across the country. I know it's going to be a really ruckus crowd in Philadelphia. We know what great fans they are, and they truly are great fans. They did throw snowballs at Santa, John. We always have to remember that. But it should be a lot of fun, no matter what happens out of it all. I just more and more I think about it. I think, you know what, San Francisco, if there's somebody who can take down Philly, it's them. So I'm sticking with that, and I think the Niners are going to make it. We'll see.
One quick question back to you then, Pete, since we won't be back on until next week because we don't do the Rebels Edge on Friday. My question is, if it's the odds favorites, if it's Philadelphia against Kansas City, who do you take?
Philadelphia against Kansas City, I think I'd probably go with Philly, actually. And the reason I say that is I love Mahomes and I love what Kansas City has done, but the defense for Philly is that good. I mean, they are just so good. There's a reason why that defensive coordinator is the most likely guy to go to Houston. He's going to bring his linebacker coach as well, who's the youngest coach in the entire league from the University of Minnesota, and he'll probably be the youngest D coordinator ever. And the 2 of them will be in Houston at some point, is my guess. But it's going to be interesting, John. But that defense that they've got is unbelievable. I mean, they are really, really good. So I think that's what does win the championship at the end.
Okay, now let's say both dogs win. Let's say Cincy faces San Francisco. Who do you take?
I almost lean towards Cincy, and the only reason I say that is it seems like I think Burrow, and I love the kid. We're going to have him on here on an extra sometime, and I'm going to put it out there already. It's going to happen. But I'll tell you what, John, he's a great kid, smart kid. He's got that moxie to him that people talk about. He's got a swagger, and he knows who he is, and he knows what he's doing. But they run the ball so well. And I think they actually are probably a team that might be able to run on San Francisco pretty well because those 2 big guys that they give the ball to, both Oklahoma Sooners, are big, mean son of a guns who've been able to run against just about everybody this year.
Well, there you have it, folks. We'll see how it plays out on Sunday. And those matchups we were just talking were the favorites and the dogs, whether they matched up in the Super Bowl. All right, Pete, have a great weekend. Remember, folks, Pete does a sports talk radio show called The Sports Huddle. It's on the Odyssey Network. So if you have the Odyssey app, you can pick it up. It's on WCCO 8:30 a.m. If you Google either of those two, you'll be able to find it. It's 10 a.m. to noon Central Time every Sunday. So until Monday, Pete and everybody, bang. We'll see you.
Bang.